I was just 14 when my father married me off to a sheikh. By the time I was 20, I have been married 5 times to 5 different Muslim men. Then I met Jesus. My name is Mary, formerly Nilufar. I am 28 years old. I was born in a small village just outside of Qom, Iran, one of the holiest cities in Shia Islam. I now live in Glendale, California, with my husband Armin, who is Armenian and a Christian. But that life, this life, it feels like a dream I never imagined I could live. The life I came from was one where girls like me didn't dream. We followed rules. We obeyed. We endured. I was the second of 6 children in a devout Muslim family. My father was a respected Quran teacher and a strict follower of Ayatollah Khamenei's teachings. He made sure we knew our place as daughters of Islam from a very young age. My mother never smiled much. She was quiet, tired, and always busy serving others. She never complained. Not even once. That's what being a good Muslim woman meant in our house. Silent, submissive, and invisible. Our days were filled with rituals and restrictions. We woke before dawn for far prayer, then prepared breakfast while the men of the house got ready for school or work. I never attended school beyond the 5th grade. My father believed that too much education would corrupt a girl's modesty. My brothers memorized the Quran and discussed politics. I swept floors, peeled potatoes, and practiced walking without making noise. From the time I was 8 years old, I wore a chatter outside the home. We were taught to lower our gaze when speaking to men, to never raise our voices, and to never question our elders, especially the imam or our father. If Allah was the highest authority, then my father was his representative in our home. Every Friday, we sat through sermons that reminded us that paradise for a woman lies beneath the feet of her husband. And every time I heard it, a small piece of me disappeared, even though I didn't fully understand why. When I turned 14, everything changed. I had just finished helping my mother prepare dinner when my father called me into his study. I thought maybe I had forgotten a chore, or that he was going to scold me for not ironing his prayer clothes properly. Instead, he looked at me, then said calmly, "Your nikah has been arranged." I didn't understand at first. I stood there frozen, waiting for him to explain. "A man from Yazd has offered a generous mahr," he said. "He is a good Muslim, and he has agreed to marry you." I didn't speak. I didn't even breathe. The man was 40 years old. I had never met him, never heard of him. But that didn't matter. My opinion wasn't needed. My father had already said yes. My mother stood beside him, eyes lowered as always. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She simply nodded in agreement. And in that moment, I knew my childhood had ended. The preparations began quickly. There was no discussion, no warning, and certainly no asking how I felt. I was told to be grateful. "You're lucky," one of my aunts said. "He has a car and owns land." Many girls would dream of this match. But I wasn't dreaming. I was drowning. I wanted to scream, to run, to disappear. But I did none of those things. I simply nodded and said, "Inshallah," because that's what I had been trained to say. At night, I cried into my pillow, praying to Allah to stop the wedding. I begged him to change my father's heart or make the man lose interest. But the silence was heavy and no help came. The more I prayed, the more alone I felt. People around me praised my obedience. They said I was bringing honor to our family. But inside, I felt like a sheep being led to the slaughter. There was no joy in my heart, only dread. The wedding itself was a blur. I remember the clapping, the women ululating, the thick smell of saffron rice and rosewater. I wore a white dress I didn't choose. My hands were painted with henna, and my eyes were lined with black coal. Everyone said I looked beautiful. But when I looked in the mirror, I saw a stranger. Someone lost. Someone terrified. My new husband arrived with gold bracelets and a thick beard. He smiled at my father and spoke loudly about the blessings of Allah. I said nothing. I kept my eyes on the ground. During the nikah ceremony, the mullah asked if I accepted the marriage. I whispered yes 3 times, my voice barely audible. No one cared how afraid I was. They only cared that the papers were signed. That night, I left my family home and entered his. A house I had never seen, with a man I didn't know. A door closed behind me, and I was no longer a girl. I was now his wife. That first night still haunts me. The room was dim, and the air felt heavy. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands shaking, my breath shallow. He was kind at first, or at least he acted like it. He told me I was beautiful, that I should be proud to be chosen. but it didn't feel like a blessing. It felt like I had been stolen. My body trembled as he reached for me. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to respond. I wanted to vanish. I turned my face to the wall and silently recited Ayat al-Kursi, hoping maybe the words would protect me. But they didn't. That night, I learned what it meant to be owned. He treated me like something he had paid for. And in a way, he had. My father exchanged me for a dowry. My consent didn't matter. My pain didn't matter. I was his now in every sense. The days that followed were numb. I learned to cook his favorite meals, to wash his clothes, to remain silent when he yelled. He wasn't cruel in front of others. In the mosque, he was a respected man. Always on time for prayer, always quoting the hadith. But behind closed doors, he reminded me often that he was in charge. The Prophet said, "A woman must obey her husband," he would say. "You are my amanat, my trust from Allah." He used religion as a chain, twisting scripture to justify control. I stopped praying. I stopped dreaming. I stopped thinking. I became what everyone wanted, a good wife, a quiet Muslim woman. But inside, I was dying. I missed my sisters, even though they never wrote. I missed my mother's cooking. I missed the sound of birds in the courtyard. But mostly, I missed the version of myself that still believed in a future of her own choosing. Looking back now, I wonder if anyone saw me. Not the girl in the white dress or the bride serving tea, but the child who still longed to play, to read, to laugh. I wonder if Allah saw me. I asked him every day for mercy, for help, for a sign that he was near. But the only answer I ever received was silence. No angel came. No miracle happened. The world moved on. And so did I. I learned to fake smiles. I learned to say Alhamdulillah when women asked if I was happy. I learned to survive. But surviving isn't the same as living. And what I lost at 14 was more than just my freedom. It was my innocence, my voice, my identity. That year was not just the beginning of a marriage. It was the beginning of a long journey through darkness. One I would travel for years, with no idea that light would ever find me again. I stayed with my first husband for only 11 months. From the outside, people thought it was a respectable, religious marriage. They had no idea what happened behind closed doors. He was proud and controlling, always quoting hadiths to make me obey. If I looked tired, he said it was my fault for lacking him on. If dinner wasn't perfect, he said I needed more patience like the wives of the Prophet. I was slapped if I spoke too slowly. I was locked in the room if I didn't respond to him with a smile. And when he finally divorced me, he said it was because I wasn't joyful enough. Just like that, my fate was written again. My father didn't seem angry when I returned home, only disappointed. "Try harder next time," he said. "A woman's beauty is in her silence." I was still only 15, but already labeled divorced. My life didn't belong to me anymore. It belonged to men and expectations. My second husband was younger, but that didn't mean he was kinder. He lived in Isfahan, and he was the son of a religious businessman who wanted to rescue me from shame. At the wedding, people said I was lucky again. Now she can rebuild her name. But no one asked if I wanted that name anymore. He was sweet for the first few days, bringing me pomegranates and perfumes. But soon I realized he had a temper like boiling water. Calm one moment, scalding the next. He would accuse me of flirting if I asked a question. He didn't like when I walked too slowly or too fast. Once, I opened the door for the neighbor's wife when he wasn't home, and he shouted at me for being careless with his honor. "You are my amanat from Allah," he said. But he treated me like a servant. If I disobeyed him, he threatened to send me back in shame. I began to speak less, breathe less, exist less. That marriage lasted 9 months. When he divorced me, I didn't even cry. I just packed my few clothes and returned to my father's house like a delivery returned to sender. My mother's eyes were hollow. She didn't ask what happened. She only said, "Keep your prayers strong." I was 16 and already broken. I didn't have a choice in any of it. My father arranged the next marriage within weeks. This time to a widower in Mashhad, a man twice my age with 3 children. "He's kind," my uncle said, "and he needs a woman to manage the house." I wasn't a person to them. I was a solution to a man's inconvenience. In Mashhad, I became both maid and stepmother. The children hated me. The man touched me like I was a cloth he owned. Every night, I would lie in bed and stare at the cracked ceiling, wondering if Allah had forgotten me. I felt more like furniture than a wife. He didn't beat me. He didn't scream. But he also never spoke to me with affection. I was invisible unless he needed something. He had a prayer rug and a Quran on the shelf, but no heart behind his worship. Once, when I said I missed my mother, he said, "You're not a girl anymore. Be strong." His relatives treated me like a replacement, never as a person. His daughters insulted me when he wasn't around. I wanted to go back, but where would I go? My father would only find me another man. After a year, he grew tired of me and told my father I was too quiet. "She brings no joy to the house," he said. That was all it took. No rights, no appeal. One sentence, and I was sent away like a broken broom. I was 17 and already discarded 3 times. The shame was heavy. The silence was heavier. I started to wonder if I even had a soul left. My 4th husband was supposed to be different. My father said he's more modern, more open-minded. He lived in Tehran and worked for a government office. His name was Karash. He wore cologne, had a trimmed beard, and drove a Peugeot. At first, I felt like maybe this would be a new beginning. He spoke gently and didn't raise his voice. We even went out a few times to parks, to a family gathering. I started to believe maybe this was what a normal marriage looked like. But within a month, everything changed. He started coming home late and blaming me for being boring. When I asked if something was wrong, he laughed and said, "You think too much." Then the insults came, quiet at first, then louder. "You're too plain. You're not educated. You're lucky I married you." He didn't hit me, but his words cut deeper. He compared me to other women, called me stupid, and told me no man would ever love someone like me. He also flirted openly with other women. One time, I saw a message on his phone from a coworker. When I asked about it, he accused me of spying and threw the phone at the wall. "Don't act like you matter," he shouted. "You're just here to serve." He refused to divorce me at first. "I'm not done humiliating you," he said during one argument. Eventually, he grew bored and let me go. I left that house with nothing, no dignity, no hope, and no belief in myself. I was 18 and already a veteran of 4 failed marriages. My body was tired. My heart was numb. My father blamed me. My mother told me to pray harder. But I stopped asking questions. I stopped hoping. I became what they always wanted: silent, obedient, invisible. I no longer prayed for love or mercy. I only prayed for the strength to get through each day without collapsing. But even that was beginning to slip away. My 5th husband was the worst. His name was Farhad. He was a religious scholar from Shiraz, known in the community for his piety. My father said, "This will restore your honor." I was 19 and had no strength left to argue. I went along because I had nothing left to lose. From the beginning, Farhad was cold. He believed a woman's job was to be silent and busy. He never spoke to me unless giving orders. He said too much talking from women was a sign of weak faith. At first, he tried to fix me with verses from the Quran. Then came the punishments: no food if I disobeyed, locked doors if I cried. He called it discipline. He told me I was lucky to be under the care of someone so godly. But he was not godly, he was cruel. Once, he found a small notebook where I had written poems to cope with my pain. He burned it in front of me, saying, "This is pride." He told people I was disobedient, that I was cursed. He said Allah was punishing him by giving him a wife like me. No one questioned him. He wore white to the mosque and quoted hadith at dinner. But at home, he used his hands and his words to break me piece by piece. I stopped speaking altogether. I stopped dreaming. I even stopped crying. I would sit in the corner of the room, wrapped in a chatter, feeling like a ghost. I was no longer a woman. I was a body without a soul. After 8 months, he told my father he could not reform me and sent me back. My father didn't ask for details. He just sighed and said, "Maybe you are not meant for marriage." I was 20, and I had been married and discarded 5 times. Each man took something from me. Each one added a new scar. And now there was almost nothing left to take. People whispered about me in the streets. Neighbors said I was cursed. Relatives avoided eye contact. At weddings, I wasn't allowed near the bride. My name had become a stain, my face a reminder of what happens to women who fail. But no one asked why. No one cared what I had endured. They only saw the number of divorces. 5. A shameful record. A proof of my worthlessness. Even my brothers avoided speaking to me. My mother said little, but sometimes I saw her watching me from across the room. Her eyes full of something I couldn't name. Pity, maybe. Or guilt. I no longer felt pain. I felt numb, like a walking shadow. The girl I used to be. the one who once looked up at the stars and asked Allah if he saw her, was gone. In her place was someone who no longer asked questions, no longer believed in answers. I was not Nilufar anymore. I was just a body moving through days. I began to forget what laughter sounded like. My voice felt foreign in my own ears. I moved like a servant in my father's house, not as a daughter, but as a burden. My father stopped trying to marry me off. He said I brought shame with every step. I wasn't allowed to join family gatherings. I sat in the kitchen, peeling potatoes and preparing trays of tea for guests who didn't want to look at me. One day, I overheard one of my cousins whisper, "She's like used cloth." I didn't flinch. I just kept pouring the tea. Somewhere inside me, something had collapsed completely. I didn't want to live, but I didn't want to die either. I simply wanted to disappear, to become wind, to vanish into the air and never have to be touched, claimed, or blamed again. I didn't know if Allah was still watching. I didn't know if he ever was. But I knew that if there was a God, he was silent. That silence became my world. I stopped asking for help. I stopped expecting anything from anyone. I was 20, divorced 5 times, and treated like trash. But the worst part wasn't how others saw me. It was how I saw myself. I believed I was worthless. I believed I deserved everything that happened. I believed I was broken beyond repair. And yet, something deep inside, buried under all the shame and silence, still longed to be seen. Just once. Just for a moment. Not as a wife. Not as a failure. But as a person. I didn't know it yet. But that longing was the seed of something new. A whisper buried under years of shouting. A flicker in the middle of the darkness. The beginning of a question that I hadn't dared ask in years. Is there anyone who sees me? Not to use me, but to love me? By the time I turned 21, I had stopped believing that my life would ever change. The girl who once prayed 5 times a day with sincerity had become a woman who whispered empty words without hope. I still did everything I was taught. I wore my hijab properly. I covered my body, my hair, even my voice. I fasted during Ramadan. I read the Quran with the same breathless reverence I was raised with. But inside me, nothing moved anymore. My hands performed the rituals, but my heart was dry. I felt like I was going through the motions to keep others from noticing how hollow I had become. My father said that if I just had more sabr, more patience, Allah would bless me. But what blessing could possibly come after 5 broken marriages and a reputation so ruined that even my cousins looked at me with pity? What kind of God demands silence while you're slowly dying inside? I kept asking myself questions that I never dared say out loud. Not to my mother, not to the other women in the mosque, not even in my own prayers. Why did Allah never rescue me? Why did he allow those men to treat me like a tool, then discard me as if I was used up and worthless? I had done everything right. I had obeyed. I had followed every rule. I had never once spoken against his name or questioned my father's orders. And still, every man I was given to took something from me. They left me with bruises no one could see, with memories I tried to bury so deep that even my dreams became dark. My mom always said Allah is just. But where was the justice in being tossed from one cruel man to another like I was nothing? If Allah was watching, did he look away? Or did he see and choose to do nothing? There were nights I stayed awake until far, lying on the thin mattress in my small room, eyes fixed on the ceiling, too exhausted to cry but too hurt to sleep. I would whisper prayers into the silence, not because I believed they would be answered, but because I didn't know what else to do. Ya Allah, do you see me? I would say, do you hear me? Am I being punished? The only response was the sound of wind against the shutters, the slow creaking of old wood, or the distant call to prayer. Each time I bowed, I felt farther away from the one I was bowing to. I would sit on the prayer rug long after the salah was finished, staring at the spot in front of me where I was told Allah's mercy descends. But all I felt was cold air and silence. And the silence was beginning to sound like an answer I didn't want to believe. My mother once told me that women earn paradise through obedience. Even if your husband is cruel, she said, be patient. Your reward will be in Jannah. But what if I didn't want paradise built on suffering? What if I just wanted to be loved now, not after death? I knew I was supposed to be grateful for the tests Allah had given me, but I felt no gratitude, only pain. I watched other women in the mosque smile and laugh, holding their children close, wearing gold bracelets that sparkled under the light. I sat quietly among them, hands folded in my lap, pretending not to notice the space between us. I didn't fit in. I was a failure, a woman who had lost everything a Muslim woman is supposed to protect. Her marriage, her purity, her reputation. And no one told me how to heal from that. They just told me to read more Quran and to never miss a prayer. I started feeling angry, but the anger scared me. I had been raised to believe that questioning Allah was the worst kind of sin. But every time I heard the Imam preach about Allah's mercy, I felt something inside me twist. Mercy. Where had it been when I begged not to be married at 14? Where was it when I cried through my first night with a man 3 times my age? Where was it when each husband humiliated me and my own father sent me back into the cycle again? I was told Islam protects women, but I had never been protected. I was told Islam honors women, but I had never been honored. All I knew was fear, shame, and silence. So I started to wonder, very quietly at first, what if they were wrong? What if everything I was taught about Allah was not the full truth? Or worse, what if it was? It felt dangerous to think these thoughts, like walking along the edge of a cliff blindfolded. But I couldn't help it anymore. I was drowning in my own silence. Every time I opened the Quran, I searched for something, anything, that would tell me I was still loved, still seen. But the verses only reminded me of rules. Obey your husband. Cover your body. Do not complain. Fear Allah. Submit. Be patient. I didn't want to be patient anymore. I wanted to be rescued. I wanted someone to tell me that I mattered, not because I obeyed, but because I existed. I began skipping my prayers. Not every day at first, but sometimes. Then more often. And then I stopped altogether. I still kept my hijab on. I didn't want to bring more shame to my mother. But my heart had stopped kneeling long before my body did. And in that empty space, something new began to grow. Not faith. Not rebellion. Just a quiet, desperate need to understand. Sometimes I would go to the back of the house and sit alone in the small courtyard, staring at the sky. It looked endless, so unlike the narrow walls of my life. I used to think the stars were watching me when I was a child. Now I wondered if they had ever looked my way at all. I whispered things I had never said aloud before. If you are real, why do you let this happen? If you are good, why is my life full of pain? I knew these were dangerous questions. My father would call them kufr. My father would call them kufr. The Imam would say I was being tempted by shaitan, but they felt like the only honest words I had left. I didn't want to insult Allah. I just wanted him to speak, to show me that I mattered, to reach down into the prison I lived in and tell me that I wasn't invisible. But he didn't, or maybe I couldn't hear him anymore. Either way, the silence became heavier. It wrapped around me like a second skin. I stopped going to the mosque. My mother said nothing, but I could see the worry in her eyes. My father didn't notice. I don't think he cared anymore. I was just another failure in his household, a broken tool. Sometimes I would hear Quran playing from his room, the voice of the reciter echoing through the walls, and it would make my heart ache. Not because I missed it, but because it reminded me of everything I once believed and how far I had fallen. I wanted to return, but I didn't know how. And deep down, I wasn't sure I wanted to. The God I had been taught to worship felt distant, harsh, silent. And I was beginning to wonder if he had ever been near at all. One night, I did something I had never done before. I prayed without a prayer rug, without facing the Qibla, without saying the memorized Arabic words. I just sat in my room, eyes closed, and whispered, "Whoever you are, if you're real, please, I need to know you see me." It wasn't a formal dua. It wasn't even directed to Allah by name. It was just a cry, a raw, desperate cry from somewhere deep inside me. I didn't hear anything back. No light, no warmth, no voice. But for the first time, I felt like I had been honest. I hadn't pretended. I hadn't performed. I had just spoken the truth. And maybe in that truth, something had finally begun to shift. I didn't know what it meant yet. I only knew I couldn't go back to the silence. I had already spent too many years in that prison. I needed something real, something true, even if it shattered everything I thought I knew. It was a night like many others. Quiet, dark, and heavy with the same questions I had asked 100 times. I had whispered a strange prayer that evening. Not the kind my father taught me, not in Arabic, and not with my face turned toward Mecca. I had simply said, "If you're real, please see me." Then I lay down on the thin mattress in my small room, not expecting anything, not even comfort. My body felt like it had aged too quickly, and my spirit was like dry land. I remember how quiet everything was. The whole house was asleep. The only sound came from the wind brushing against the window. I closed my eyes and drifted off. That was when it happened. At first, it felt like I was floating in nothing. The air was thick and strange, and I couldn't tell if I was awake or asleep. Everything around me was silent, but it didn't feel empty. I found myself standing in the middle of a desert. The sand was soft under my feet, but cold. The sky above me was dark gray, like before a storm, but there were no clouds, no wind, no stars. Just a stillness that pressed against my skin. I looked down and saw that my clothes were torn and dirty, like rags hanging off a body that had been wandering for years. My hands were bruised, and my feet were bare. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know what I was supposed to do, so I just stood there frozen. Then, in the distance, I saw someone walking toward me. Slowly, calmly, like he had all the time in the world. He was wearing white, pure, glowing white, but not like any cloth I had seen before. It didn't shine from the outside. It seemed to shine from within him. As he walked closer, my heart began to beat faster, not with fear, but something I couldn't name. He stopped a few feet in front of me. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. But he looked at me like he had always known me, like he had been waiting for me. His eyes were not like anyone else's. They were full of something that went deeper than words. Not pity, not curiosity. It was love, pure love. And in that look, I felt something shift deep inside me. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. Fully, completely seen. Not as a broken woman. Not as a failure. Not as a shame to her family or a burden to her community. Just as me, Nilufar. I opened my mouth to speak, but no sound came. Tears began to run down my face without warning. He didn't reach out to touch me, but I felt his presence like warmth in the cold air. And then he spoke in a voice that was soft, but full of authority. "You are not forgotten," he said. "You are mine." Those 3 words, "You are mine," broke something open in me. My knees gave way, and I fell to the sand, sobbing without shame. The weight I had carried for years seemed to crack and crumble like old stone. I don't know how long I stayed there, crying in the desert before him. It could have been minutes. It could have been hours. But in that place, time didn't matter. Only the truth in his words did. I didn't understand what they meant. I had never heard of any prophet or imam speaking like that. But I knew deep inside that whoever this man was, he saw me in a way no one else ever had. I whispered, "Who are you?" But he only smiled, a smile so full of peace it made me weep even harder. Then he stepped forward and held out his hand. I reached for it, and as our hands touched, I felt life move through my body, warm, steady, and real. When I woke up, I was still crying. My pillow was wet, and my hands were trembling. The room was dark, and nothing had changed, and yet everything had. I sat up slowly, feeling like I had just come back from another world. My chest was still tight with emotion, but it wasn't pain. It was something new, something I hadn't felt in years, hope. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel dirty or worthless. I felt seen. I kept replaying his words in my mind. "You are mine." What did that mean? Who was he? I knew he wasn't just a dream. That presence was too real, too full of peace. And I needed to know who he was. But I couldn't ask anyone around me. My family would never understand. My imam would call it a trick from Shaitan. So I kept it to myself. But inside, something had awakened. I needed to find the man in white. I waited until the house was empty the next afternoon. My father had gone to the mosque, and my brothers were out. My mother was busy cooking in the kitchen. I quietly took my father's old phone from the drawer. It was one of those basic phones with slow internet, but it was enough. I typed, "Man in white dream Muslim woman." I hit search, expecting nothing, but the results shocked me. Story after story appeared. Women and men from Iran, Syria, Egypt, Indonesia. People who had dreams like mine. They described the same white clothes, the same gentle voice, the same feeling of peace. And all of them said the man in the dream was Isa, Jesus. My heart stopped. Jesus. I knew that name. In Islam, he was Isa al-Masih, a prophet, not the son of God. We were taught to respect him, but never to follow him, never to pray to him. But these people, they were calling him Lord. I started reading everything I could find. Testimonies, articles, videos. Whenever I had a moment alone, I went back to that old phone and searched more. I was obsessed. The more I read, the more I felt like the pieces of my life were finally connecting. These people spoke about being lost, broken, rejected, and how Jesus met them in their darkest moments. I cried reading their words because it felt like they were telling my story. One woman from Lebanon had almost taken her own life when Jesus appeared to her in a dream. Another woman from Yemen had been beaten by her husband and locked away until she had a vision of the man in white saying, "You are loved." It was all so familiar. I wasn't alone. I wasn't crazy. And slowly, the fear I had always lived with started to lose its power. It was being replaced by something unfamiliar, but beautiful. I think it was faith. But it wasn't the kind of faith I had grown up with. The one full of rules and fear and shame. This was something different. The people I was reading about didn't follow Jesus because they had to. They followed him because he had changed their lives. He had shown them love, not control. Freedom, not fear. Grace, not guilt. I didn't know how to explain it, but I knew I wanted more of it. I wanted to know him, the man in white. I started whispering his name when I was alone. Jesus, if it was really you, come back. I wasn't sure if it was right or wrong, but it felt honest. And for the first time in my life, honesty didn't feel dangerous. It felt like the beginning of something new, something true. I didn't know what would happen next, but I was willing to risk everything to find out who he really was. Over the next few days, I kept searching. I started writing things down in a small notebook and hiding it under my mattress. I wrote every detail I remembered from the dream. I wrote the words he said. "You are mine." I wrote verses from the testimonies I read. And most of all, I wrote my questions. Who are you, Jesus? Why did you come to me? What do you want from me? Are you really the Son of God? Is it wrong to love you? Each question felt dangerous, but also freeing. I had never asked questions before, only obeyed. But now, I was discovering that faith wasn't just about obedience. It was about trust. And I didn't trust the religion that had crushed me for so long. I didn't trust the God who had stayed silent while I suffered. But this man, this Jesus, he had spoken. He had come into my dream and called me his. And I couldn't let that go. Even though I was still surrounded by the same walls, something inside me had changed. I started to feel less afraid. I still wore my hijab, still helped my mother in the kitchen, still kept quiet when my father entered the room. But inside, I was different. I was searching for truth, not just tradition. And in that search, I found strength. I still didn't have answers. I still didn't know how to follow Jesus. I didn't have a Bible, or a church, or even a friend who believed in him. But I had that dream. I had his voice. And I had a hunger to know him more. That hunger became my lifeline. Every moment I could, I went back to that small, cracked phone. I read more stories. I listened to more testimonies. And each time, it felt like Jesus was coming closer. Not with thunder or fear, but with a gentle, steady love that wrapped around my broken heart. After the dream and all the stories I found online, I couldn't stop thinking about Jesus. I didn't understand everything about him, but the more I read, the more I felt drawn to him. I started searching deeper, sometimes for hours. Whenever my family was out or distracted, I found Christian websites in Farsi, videos of former Muslims sharing how they came to faith, and even online Bibles. I would read quietly, heart pounding, afraid someone would hear the screen scroll or the soft sound of music playing in the background. I learned that Jesus didn't just love from a distance. He forgave sins, healed wounds, and called people to follow him without fear. It felt so different from what I had known. I started praying, not in Arabic, not with memorized phrases, but in my own words. "Jesus, are you really there?" I would whisper. "If you love me, please show me what to do." Each time, peace filled my chest like warm light. I began to feel like I was living two lives. During the day, I still acted like the obedient daughter, wearing my hijab, serving tea, helping in the kitchen, avoiding questions. But inside, something was growing. I couldn't explain it, but it felt like I was waking up from a long sleep. I looked at the world differently. I no longer believed that my life had to end in silence. I didn't know where this path would lead, but I knew I couldn't go back. I continued to search secretly, especially late at night, when the house was dark and still. I found a Farsi New Testament and began reading the Gospel of John. The first words shook me. "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." I had never read anything like it. It spoke not just to my mind, but to my soul. It felt like Jesus himself was speaking to me through those pages. As days turned into weeks, my secret faith became the only thing keeping me alive. I started talking to Jesus like he was right there beside me. I didn't need to light a candle or go to a mosque. I didn't need to cover my head or wash in a certain way. I just spoke, and he listened. I told him about the fear I carried, about the pain I had buried, about the hope I barely dared to hold. And every time I felt his peace. I didn't know anyone who followed him. I couldn't talk to my mother, my sisters, or even the women at the mosque. They would never understand. They would call me mad or worse, an infidel. But Jesus didn't call me that. He called me his. That truth gave me courage, even when I knew the risks. I began to whisper his name under my breath during the call to prayer. It was dangerous, but it was also freedom. Then everything changed. One afternoon, I was watching a video on the old phone. The testimony of a woman from Egypt who had found Jesus after a life of abuse. I didn't hear the door open. I didn't see my younger brother enter the room. I only realized he was behind me when he shouted, "What are you watching?" I froze. My hands trembled as I tried to close the video. But it was too late. He grabbed the phone and stared at the screen. His eyes widened with fury. "You're watching Christian garbage?" he yelled. "Are you trying to shame our family?" I tried to explain, but my voice was weak. He stormed out of the room, screaming for my father. In seconds, everything I had hidden came crashing down. I stood there, heart racing, waiting for the punishment I knew was coming. I had been careful for months, but now my secret was exposed, and I couldn't take it back. My father came rushing in like a storm. His eyes were filled with rage I hadn't seen since childhood. He slapped me so hard I fell to the floor. My ears rang, my cheek burned, and my body shook. "You disgrace me," he shouted. "How dare you bring Kufr into my house?" I tried to speak, but he kicked the phone across the room and grabbed me by the arm. He dragged me to the small storage room near the back of the house and locked the door from the outside. I was trapped. No window, no light, just silence and fear. That night, I sat in the dark, knees pulled to my chest, tears running down my face. I whispered the only prayer I could. "Jesus, I'm scared. Please don't leave me now." I expected pain, terror, more beatings. But what came instead was an unexpected stillness. In that small, locked room, I felt a presence stronger than the fear. He was there. The next day, the punishments began. My father invited the local imam and 2 uncles to come. They entered the room, looking at me like I was already dead. The imam sat across from me, quoting Quranic verses, warning me that I had been deceived by Shaitan. "You are confused," he said. "Jesus is not the Son of God. He was only a prophet." I didn't respond. I kept my eyes on the floor. They poured water over my head, recited prayers, and told me I needed ruqya, Islamic cleansing. My father said I was mentally unstable, that I needed discipline. From that day forward, I wasn't allowed to touch a phone or speak unless spoken to. They moved me to a separate room, far from the rest of the family. No one looked at me. No one talked to me. My mother cried silently, but she didn't say a word. I had become a ghost in my own home, a prisoner for loving Jesus. Then came the final blow. One evening, I overheard my father on the phone with a relative. His voice was cold and sharp. "Nilufar is dead to us," he said. "She has left Islam. She no longer exists." My heart dropped. I sat on the edge of the bed, unable to breathe. My name, my identity, was erased in a single sentence. The next day, I saw the message in our family group chat on WhatsApp. "We mourn the loss of Nilufar. She is no longer part of our blood." I stared at the screen, numb. There were no tears left in me, only silence. But even in that silence, I heard something else, a whisper deep in my spirit. "You are mine." They had disowned me, but Jesus had claimed me. They had buried me, but he had made me alive. That was the moment I knew I could never go back, no matter what it cost. I had found something worth losing everything for. The days that followed were hard. I was still locked inside the room, with food passed under the door and no one speaking to me. My younger sister left a scarf and a note outside the door one morning. The note said, "I don't understand, but I miss you." It made me cry for hours. I still loved my family. I still wished things could be different, but I couldn't lie anymore. I couldn't pretend to be someone I wasn't. The Jesus I had met in the dream, the Jesus I had come to know through those stories and verses, was more real than anything I had ever known. Even in that room, I felt free in ways I never had in the outside world. I sang to him quietly, songs I had heard in the testimonies. I memorized Bible verses I had written in my notebook. I spoke to him like a friend. And the more I did, the less alone I felt. There were moments when I wanted to give up, when the hunger, isolation, and rejection felt too heavy. But each time, I remembered his voice. I remembered the dream. I remembered the peace. And I held on. I would whisper, "Jesus, I don't have anything left, but I still have you." And somehow that was enough. I had no Bible, no church, no community. But I had him. And in that dark, locked room, I grew stronger. Not because of my strength, but because his love was holding me together. One night, I remembered a verse from the Gospel of Matthew that I had read earlier. "Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." I clung to those words like a lifeline. They reminded me that what I was going through had a purpose, that my suffering was not unseen, that Jesus himself had walked a path of rejection. And now I was walking behind him. I began to understand what it meant to follow him. It wasn't just about believing. Anyone can believe when life is easy. It was about staying faithful when everything is taken from you, when your own blood turns against you, when your name is erased. That's when real faith is born. In those days of darkness, I found light, not from the sun, but from the spirit that lived inside me. I no longer begged for escape. I began to pray for strength. I no longer asked for my family to accept me. I prayed they would one day see what I saw, that Jesus is not just a prophet, but the Savior who comes for the broken, the rejected, the forgotten. And I was all of those things. Yet in him, I was chosen. I was loved. I was free. That freedom came at a price, but it was worth everything. I would rather be disowned in this life than live another day without the truth I had finally found. The decision to leave came quietly, like a whisper I couldn't ignore. I had spent so many days locked inside that room that I stopped keeping track of time. The air was stale, and the silence was heavy. But one night, while lying on the thin mattress in the dark, I felt something shift inside me. I remembered the voice in the dream, his voice. "You are mine." That night, I whispered back, "If I am yours, then show me the way out." I didn't know how escape would happen. I had no plan, no money, and no one to trust. But I believed, truly believed, that Jesus had not brought me this far just to leave me behind. I began praying more boldly, asking not only for strength, but for doors to open. I didn't want to run because of fear. I wanted to walk toward a new life, one where I could worship freely, one where I could finally live. The answer came the next evening, in the form of a soft knock on the wall near my room. At first, I thought I imagined it, but then I heard it again, 3 light taps. I moved closer and whispered, "Who is it?" A familiar voice replied, "It's me, Soraya." Soraya was our neighbor, a woman in her 40s who had always been kind to me. When I was a child, she used to give me fresh bread through the fence and smile without saying much. "I know what they've done to you," she said through the wall. "And I know why." My heart raced. "I can help you," she added, "but we must move quickly. There's not much time." I felt frozen, terrified and hopeful all at once. She passed me a small wire through the tiny vent, and I used it to unlock the latch inside the door. My hands trembled so badly I thought I would drop it. But somehow the lock turned, and the door opened. I stepped into the hallway like a prisoner tasting freedom for the first time. My legs felt weak, but I didn't stop. Soraya grabbed my arm and led me through the back entrance, avoiding the creaky wooden floorboards. She knew every sound in our house and how to move without waking anyone. We slipped out through the back gate, hidden behind a tangle of grapevines and broken stone. Outside, the night air hit my face like a slap, cold, sharp, real. I had no bag, no money, nothing but the clothes on my back. My heart pounded so hard I could barely hear her instructions. "We'll go to my cousin's place for now," she whispered. "He's safe. He knows believers like you." My eyes widened. "You know?" I asked. She nodded. "I met Jesus too." That sentence broke me. I grabbed her hand tightly as tears filled my eyes. I wasn't alone. She understood. She had walked this road before, and she was helping me walk it now. We moved quickly through the alleyways, avoiding any light or open space. I felt like every shadow was a trap and every sound a warning. But Soraya stayed calm, guiding me like someone who had done this before. When we finally reached her cousin's home, she knocked 3 times in a pattern. The door opened slowly, and a tall man with kind eyes let us in without a word. His name was Ramin. He handed me a shawl, gave me water, and gestured for me to sit. I collapsed onto a worn couch in a dimly lit room. The smell of old wood and tea filled the air. My entire body was shaking, not just from fear, but from disbelief. I had escaped. I had actually made it out. Soraya sat beside me and gently said, "You're safe now. You're not going back." Those words felt like sunlight in a place that had never seen morning. I nodded, still too stunned to speak. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay on the couch, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. My mind was flooded with everything. My father's voice, my mother's silence, the imam's threats, the sound of the lock turning, the feel of Soraya's hand pulling me into the night. It all swirled inside me like a storm. But beneath it, there was something else. A strange stillness. A peace I couldn't explain. I whispered, "Jesus, you did this. You really brought me out." I didn't know what the future held. I didn't even know where I was. But I knew that I was no longer a prisoner. I was free. And even though the freedom was still fragile, still small, it was real. I spent the next morning wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea, listening to Ramin read passages from the Bible in Farsi. Every word felt like it was written for me. Every verse was like water to my thirsty heart. Over the next few days, I stayed hidden at Ramin's house while Soraya helped me get new clothes and a small notebook to write in. I filled the pages with prayers, questions, and verses that Ramin shared with me. I couldn't believe how different the Bible was from what I had been taught. It didn't speak to me like a list of rules. It spoke to me like a love letter. Personal, deep, alive. I read about Jesus touching the leper, forgiving the woman caught in adultery, healing the blind man, and speaking with kindness to those the world rejected. I saw myself in every story, the broken one, the outcast, the forgotten, and yet he never turned them away. He never turned me away. I started praying openly now, not hiding, not whispering. I talked to Jesus like a friend. I told him everything, my fears, my guilt, my hopes. And each time I felt him closer, not watching from above, but right beside me. Then one afternoon, Ramin asked me if I was ready to be baptized. My heart stopped. I had read about baptism, but never thought it would be possible for someone like me. I asked, "Does that mean I'm leaving everything behind?" He smiled gently and said, "It means you're stepping into everything new." I didn't need time to think. I nodded through my tears and said, "Yes, I want to belong to him fully." We planned for the next evening, when the house would be quiet. Soraya brought a small basin and filled it with warm water. There were only 4 of us in the room. Ramin, Soraya, another believer named Lala, and me. But it felt like heaven was watching. Ramin looked at me and asked, "Do you want to choose a new name? One that reflects your new life in Christ?" I thought for a moment and whispered, "Mariam. I want to be called Mariam." It was the name of a woman who said yes to God. Ramin smiled and said, "Mariam, based on your faith in Jesus Christ, I baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit." As I knelt and dipped my head into the water, I felt the old me sink. All the shame, the fear, the rejection, all of it washed away in a silence deeper than words. When I came up, I gasped, not from the cold, but from the overwhelming feeling of being made new. I had never felt so clean, so whole. They wrapped me in a towel, and Lala hugged me tightly, whispering, "Welcome home, sister." I cried into her shoulder, not out of sadness, but out of joy. The kind of joy I never believed could be mine. That night, I wrote in my notebook, "Today I died, and today I was born." I signed it with my new name, Mariam. It was the first time I ever wrote it. It felt like a promise. From that day forward, I was no longer just a runaway. I was a daughter, a believer, a follower of Jesus. The world outside still felt dangerous. My father was still looking for me. My name had been cursed in my family's circles. But none of that could compare to what had happened inside me. I was not the same. I couldn't be. I now had a name that no man had given me. A name given by the one who had called me his from the beginning. I spent the next few weeks learning more about the faith. Ramin connected me with a small underground church that met in secret. We shared meals, studied the Bible, and prayed in whispers. But even in those quiet moments, the Spirit was loud inside us. We were alive. We were free. We were loved. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel ashamed of who I was. I felt chosen. My name is Mary now. And today, as I sit by the window in my apartment in Glendale, California, watching the sun filter through the leaves outside. It's hard to believe this life is mine. Just a few years ago, I was locked in a small room in Iran, disowned by my family, with nothing but a whisper of hope that Jesus would not abandon me. But he didn't. He carried me out of that darkness and into a life I never thought possible. I am now married to Armin, an Armenian Christian man with the gentlest heart I've ever known. We met through the small house church that helped me after my escape. He didn't look at me like damaged goods. He didn't treat me like a project or a problem. From the first day we met, he listened, really listened, to my story without judgment. He saw me the way Jesus did. And slowly, I began to believe I was worthy of love. Marrying Armin was not a fairy tale. I brought into our marriage not just my body, but years of trauma, fear, and broken trust. He knew I had been married 5 times before. He knew I had been beaten, silenced, and abandoned. And yet, he never looked at me with pity, only with patience. The first time he reached for my hand, I pulled away without thinking. My body still carried the memory of hands that hurt. But he didn't rush me. He said, "I will wait, however long it takes." I cried that night, not because I was afraid, but because I had never been offered time before. Everything in my past had been forced, rushed, and stolen. Now, for the first time, love came without pressure. Armin prayed with me, read the Bible with me, and when I had nightmares, he stayed up and held my hand until the fear passed. Jesus gave me a husband, not a master, a partner, not a prison. Even now, years later, there are moments that still surprise me. A smell, a sound, or even a word can send my mind back to a memory I thought I had buried. Sometimes when I hear the call to prayer from a nearby mosque, my heart tightens for a second. I remember being 14, dressed in white, forced to smile while my father signed me away to a stranger. There are still scars in me, deep ones, that healing can't erase, but love makes them less painful. Armin never asks me to forget. He simply reminds me that I am not that girl anymore. He reminds me that Jesus makes all things new. I still have days when I wake up in tears, but now I also have days filled with laughter, quiet mornings with coffee, and long walks holding the hand of a man who honors me. Healing doesn't mean the pain never existed. It means it no longer controls who I am. In time, I began sharing my story. Not all at once, not with everyone, but with women who reminded me of the girl I used to be. Broken, confused, searching for a way out but terrified of what freedom might cost. Through our local church, I was introduced to an online community of former Muslim women now following Christ. I started messaging them, praying with them, listening to their stories. Some of them were still living in secret. Some were afraid, just like I had been. One girl from Turkey told me, "I saw a man in white, and I didn't understand who he was until I found your story." I cried reading that, because I remember how it felt to be the only one. Now I know I'm not. Jesus is appearing to women all over the world, calling them by name, just like he called me. And now I get to tell them, "You are not forgotten. You are his." I also speak at small gatherings now, mostly in homes or through secure online meetings. I tell my story, not to gain sympathy, but to glorify the one who saved me. I don't sugarcoat the pain. I don't pretend everything is perfect, but I always end with the truth. Jesus was with me in every chapter. Even when I didn't know his name, even when I thought God was silent, he was still there. I remember one woman asking me, "Was it worth it? Losing your family, your home, everything?" And without hesitation, I said, "Yes. 1,000 times yes." Because what I lost was nothing compared to what I found. I found love. I found freedom. I found truth. And most of all, I found the one who had never stopped looking for me. Even when I was married off, abused, and discarded, Jesus never left me. He waited until I was ready to see him. And when I did, he changed everything. Armin and I now host a small Bible study for Iranian women every week. Some of them are new believers. Some are still searching. We cook together, read scripture, and worship in Farsi. Sometimes we cry together. Other times we laugh like sisters. There's healing in community, in knowing you are not alone in your journey. Many of these women still carry fear in their eyes. Fear of being found out, fear of being disowned. But little by little, Jesus replaces that fear with peace. The same peace that changed me. I watch them blossom, and it fills my heart with joy. I may never return to Iran. My family may never speak my name again. But through this ministry, I feel like I've found a new family, a family of believers born not of blood, but of faith. And in their eyes, I see what I once longed to believe, that I am not just a survivor. I am a daughter of God. I still carry memories of my old life. The quiet kitchen where I prepared tea without being spoken to. The cold stare of my third husband when I dared to ask a question. The voice of my father saying I was dead to him. These memories don't disappear, but they no longer define me. They are part of my story, yes, but not the ending, because Jesus wrote a new ending for me. He didn't just save me from a broken past. He gave me a future with purpose, a future where I can walk without fear, where I can speak without shame, where I can love and be loved without conditions. Every day I wake up next to Armin and whisper, "Thank you, Jesus." Not because life is easy, but because it's real. I am no longer pretending to be someone I'm not. I no longer wear masks. I am Mariam. I am free. And I am finally truly alive. To the woman listening to this, wherever you are, maybe in a small room, behind a locked door, or in a crowded house where no one sees you, I want you to know something. You are not alone. I know what it feels like to be invisible. I know what it means to be owned, traded, and silenced. But I also know the one who sees you, the one who calls you by name. His name is Jesus, and he is not far from you. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be strong. Just whisper his name. That's how it began for me. Just one whisper in the dark. And he answered. I lost my family, my country, and everything familiar. But I gained a love I had never known. A love that heals. A love that restores. If he did it for me, he will do it for you. You are not forgotten. You are not too broken. You are loved. And you are his.